Okay, so I might just add a couple of little details to this bouncing ball. I won't go ahead and finish the animation. I'll let you guys do that for your exercise, but see if you can finish off the shot and see if you can get the ball to come to a rest so you actually see the decay of energy, and perhaps it can roll across the floor at the end. Perhaps when the concrete block falls over, you could put a bit of shake. And see if you can get as much personality as you can into this exercise. Okay, so what if I'll just show you a couple of little ideas we could do to add some detail. One of them could be a bit of motion blur. So because the ball is moving pretty quick here on these keyframes, if I hit this little button right down here, this little motion blur switch, I can toggle it on or off. If you can't see that, then you have to go and edit your columns. I think it's in switches. Yeah, so if you can't see the motion blur and the other switches in that column, go right click, columns, and then turn on switches. And then you've got to hit the motion blur button. And that will mean, as you can see, the ball now, the faster it moves, the more blur it is rendered with. And that's to emulate what a camera would do. So if something's moving fast in front of a camera, it creates motion blur depending on the shutter angle. In a stills camera, we would call that shutter speed, and in a motion camera, we'd call that shutter angle. So I can edit that. There's a few ways in After Effects, but I'm just going to show you this way first, and we can look at some others in another tutorial. So if I go back to my composition settings, Command K, you'll remember. Then if you go to your Advanced tab, we're in Basic here. If I click Advanced, you see you've got shutter angle and samples per frame. So I'm just going to drop the shutter angle from 180 down to, I don't know, let's try 60. And watch. You'll see now the motion blur is still there, but it's a little more subtle. So I suggest you get in there and just find something that works for you, whether you want to be a sort of photographic feel, or maybe you want a crispier feel. Perhaps you want to exaggerate the motion blur a bit. It depends on your creative requirements, of course. There's also samples per frame. You might find that harder to see, but you will notice that on a big screen with your renders, the number of times the image is sampled. So I'm just going to leave it at 12 for now. I just want you to look at shutter angle to get the amount of blur. There is an effect we can also use to do that, but this is the one that's built into your advanced settings in composition is a good one to start. Okay, another little detail I'm going to do is just adding a shadow. So to add a shadow, I'm just going to use a shape layer down here. Just going to grab a little ellipse tool. I'm going to draw a little ellipse. Turn the stroke off. I use Option to toggle the stroke options till it's off. Change the fill color to something like this. I'm going to use a darkish desaturated purple type color. I'm going to center the anchor point with my pan behind tool. Then I'm going to put that right under where the ball hits the ground. Right there is the first one. So I'm going to put my shadow right there. I'm going to put it behind the ball, obviously. And then I'm going to split layer. Remember Shift Command D to split layer. Going to delete it there. Split layer again. Remember, splitting layer in After Effects is just sort of like cutting in Premiere in editing, but it's just a quick way to isolate your layer into a certain number of frames. So I want my shadow to appear there and disappear here. I'm going to do that with transparency, so opacity keyframes. There's the impact. I want it to be 100% there. And then as it goes into the air, I want it to go back to 0. So I want to go from 0 to 100. Perhaps I don't need to go all the way to 100. I might just try going to 60% opacity. So 0 to 60, back to 0 again. Now I also, because of the blur here, I'll add a blur to the shadow. So effect, blur and sharpen. I'll just use one of these blurs. You can try different ones. And I'm going to add I could do a directional blur. That might work a bit better. Let's try that. Effect, blur, directional blur. I'll put the blur like that. Let's have a look. That looks quite cool, doesn't it? Now, is it in the right place? Probably a little bit lower. Let's bring it down to there. Make it a bit bigger. And now I'm just going to duplicate that shadow for the second bounce. So there, I want another one. I'm just going to, remember we use Shift Command D to split the layer, but just Command D duplicates layer. So duplicate, I'm just going to put it there. It's in the wrong spot, but the keyframes are all right. I just now grab the second one and put it there. That's a very quick, rough job, but it's a fast way to, let's watch that. It's a good start. I'd come in and tweak that a bit more, but perhaps those opacity keyframes, perhaps we'll change it from 60 to 50. It might look a bit more subtle. Do the same with that one. Go to 50. I could put another shadow here under the creaking concrete. It would give it a lot of weight, wouldn't it? So I'm just going to draw. I'll just use one of these shapes this time. I've got the same color. I could just use opacity, I'll do the same opacities, 50. I can even copy and paste the same blur to this one so it looks the same. Might add another blur later, but that's a good start. So opacity, I'm going to keyframe from there from 0 to 50, so something like that. A bit dark, isn't it? So I'll probably try this one at more like 20. A bit more subtle, otherwise your eye will be drawn to it quite a lot. Anyway, you can keep tweaking that and playing with that, finding your own look. But a bit of shadow will give your animation a little bit of weight. I'm going to add another blur. I'm going to go one of these blurs as well. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. And it's nice, that feels a bit more subtle, like my eye isn't drawn to it too much. Okay, so complete that animation, add a few shadows to give it a bit of weight. You could also put a little bit of sound in there, would help as well. We can just import audio files into After Effects and simply drag and drop them to the timeline and line them up. So we could bring in a little bouncing WAV file or MP3